This episode of ENVERT TV is being brought to you by the Indie Bible. The Indie Bible offers affordable music promotion for artists of all genres. For 20 years, the Indie Bible has helped independent artists with music promotion, getting radio airplay, distribution, radio promotion, and much more. The Indie Bible features the most comprehensive music business directory with over 1,500 pages, organized into 16 sections sorted by genre and geographic location, featuring radio stations, booking agencies, and more. The Indie Bible will help you to gain worldwide exposure across the US, Canada, UK, Europe, Australia, Asia, and everywhere else, all on a limited budget. To grab the latest edition of the Indie Bible, click the link in our description below.
Acceptance, acceptance, long overdue. Please forgive my clumsy fingers. They can hold a heart. The more I want it, the more they tremble, insecure from the start.
Hey, what's up, music lovers? I'm Flisadam, the editor-in-chief here at ENVERT, and welcome back to ENVERT TV. During this special episode, I had a chance to catch up with recording artist Cecily. During our conversation, she outlined how DC and live instrumentation has really shaped her sound, shared her thoughts on the new jazz movement, the power of affirmations, the importance of visuals as an independent artist, and her breakout project, The Awakening Part 1. Check out our conversation here. So, first and foremost, thank you for taking the time out to talk to me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
There are so many things that I want to ask you, and I have like a very long list of questions. But I know I only have you for a short window. So, I do want to start first by doing a mental kind of check-in with you to see how you're really handling quarantine and how everything is in the DC area. I know that there's not only just a pandemic, but there's also a lot of protests. I have close friends and family that live in DC. So how are you holding up?
You know, I've actually been pretty good. I was telling someone yesterday that the pandemic has been, or I should say not the pandemic, but the lockdown has been rather peaceful, which is nice, just to be able to be at home for a long time and spend time with family. And, as an independent musician, you're always kind of like running around. So it's nice not to be running around for a little while. And, nice to spend lots of time with my parents and my husband. So it's been good. It's been good to me. I'm not complaining at all. Yeah.
That's good to hear. I think one of the things that, if we were to look for the silver lining in everything that's going on, is that a lot of families are becoming much closer, being that we are kind of shaking off some of the mundane or some of the less important things that we were focused on in the past, and now we really kind of regroup back to family. So that's good to hear. What I do want to start by asking is, now I found this extremely interesting when I was doing my research on you. And one of the things that came across was that you were a professional in another industry for a while, and you chose to walk away to pursue music full time. Now, there's this whole myth in the air that if you are an artist, you have to be a struggling artist, or you can't pursue other endeavors. So, for you to have been successful in that industry in the professional capacity, what was it that made you really turn away from that or walk away from that to pursue music full time?
Well, actually, so I wouldn't say that I was successful in a professional way in another industry. I did get a degree in another industry, actually in political science. And for a long time, I really wanted to work in the world of international relations. And that was kind of my focus, in school and just, and getting internships and things, summer jobs and things like that. But the more that I got into it, the more I realized it just didn't, it wasn't for me. I had really gravitated towards that career because I thought that that was my purpose. I thought that, I really wanted to travel the world and find ways to, help people and help people to lift themselves out of poverty. And that was kind of like what I really wanted to do for many years. But the more I learned about the industry itself, the more I realized that it wasn't going to bring me joy to do that. And that what I really wanted to do was help people and that I could use music to do the same thing. And so I got my degree in political science and Black studies with a concentration in international relations. But I decided even before I graduated that I was going to do music full time. And that's what I did.
So when you told your family this, right? Or I'm not sure if you were married at that point or you were partnered. What were their reactions?
So yeah, I was not married yet. I told my mom pretty early on. I think I was a sophomore in college when I told my mom, like, I think I actually want to do music full time. And she asked me why, and I explained to her why, what I just told you, and she said, okay, we'll work on it. That's what she said. And so she put me in touch with some of my cousins that had worked in the industry, in the music industry, and she started sending me books about the music business so that I could learn more. And my parents have always been very supportive. I think that there's still fear around, me not being able to support myself or whatever that is. But at the end of the day, they just want me to be happy. And that was always very clear throughout my life that my parents just wanted me to be happy. I mean, they, of course, sent me to school to study political science, but they also paid for all my voice lessons and came to all my choir performances and recitals all through high school, So I always knew that my parents supported my musical endeavors as well. And I think that my parents really just wanted me to be happy and to go into what I was doing with full knowledge. And so they assisted me in getting to that point, and I'm really, really grateful for that.
You, it is refreshing to hear that because sometimes we have conversations with artists that didn't have the support of their family and that to hear that you were rooted in it. You also talk a lot about your family as far as their influence on your musical choice and your musical interest a lot early on. But I don't want to touch on that. I'm more so interested, and I think viewers will be interested in this as well. Is you kind of described yourself in some ways. I want to make sure that I use the correct verbiage, but often you said that you aren't a trendy artist, right? You're more so focused on creating something that's timeless and not something that's maybe more so disposable. So, what did you mean exactly by that?
Yeah, so I do listen to the radio, and I like some things I hear on the radio. But in general, I don't model what I'm doing based on what I hear on the radio. I think that's what I mean is that my influences are my influences, and I'm kind of rooted in what I grew up listening to. Like you said, what my parents introduced me to. I'm the youngest of four, so I have older brothers and a sister who also introduced me to a lot of music. And in general, I pull from what I grew up listening to, and that's um, a lot of 70s soul, Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, Minnie Riperton, a lot of Motown, a lot of, Smokey Robinson, and then also a lot of 80s R&B like Luther Vandross, Anita Baker, a lot of 90s R&B, Brandy, Mary J. Blige, Faith Evans, and then also my dad really is really into jazz heavy. So he would always play a lot of Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Ahmad Jamal, McCoy Tyner. So I really, when I sit down to write, Those are the things that really move me. Those are the things that, because at the end of the day, for my music, it feels like home to me. You know, I want it to feel new but also familiar. And for me, familiar is those sounds, that soul music, that 90s R&B, that jazz influence. And so that's what I really pull from. And so, I mean, of course, I want my music to sound in some way, 2020, because I am who I am and I live in this space in this lifetime for a reason. But I don't, I think, when I've gone to LA and places, because I live in DC, but when I've traveled to, especially LA, I will, there's a lot of people who are, and there's no shade to them because they love what they're doing, but there's a lot of people who are just trying to make the next hit like dot, 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 you know? Um, and I just know that's not me. And that's one reason I don't live in LA at the moment, because I feel like certain places put that pressure on you to fit what's happening now. And I personally want my music to transcend what's happening now in some way.
Yeah. And one thing that you just said that really stuck out is jazz, the jazz influence. And jazz, I think for most of the younger generation, the newer listeners and aficionados of music, they often forget to put jazz in the conversation as far as reach and how many genres pull from jazz and how many artists have jazz, whether it's jazz chords or arrangements in their music. So I'm interested on your thoughts on the new jazz movement. There have been people like the new artists. Well, I won't say new, but artists that have really resurfaced and revived the jazz scenes on a major scale. One of which is you, but we have others like Kimani Washington and a bunch of others. So, what are your thoughts on the new jazz
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. When I moved back home, because I went to college outside of Philly, so when I moved back home to DC, and I was trying to figure out how to do this independent musician thing, and I was just really, I had never approached music from, a professional way. It had always been a hobby. So now I was trying to do it as a profession and I was trying to figure that out. And so the first musicians that I really connected with were jazz musicians, and they told me, yeah, come to the jam sessions. And that's what I did. I would go and I would be so nervous. Like I would learn a standard and I would be so nervous. And I'd go up there and I'd sing my standard and I'd be like trying to count bars in my head the whole time and try to tune into the chords so I know when to come back in, because jazz, it's not a pop song. It's not like this is always when this happens and this is always when this happens. Like it's very fluid. Of course there's rules and that's what you learn to listen for and that's what you study for. But it was a lot of like, cutting my teeth in terms of, trying to understand like how I fit into that scene in some way. And I think DC has a lot of amazing jazz artists who are from here, but also come through here all the time. So, I just started meeting people and, I started listening to newer stuff because I think growing up, I always listened to what my dad listened to, but I started listening to, Robert Glasper, and I really loved what he was doing, around the time I graduated from college, like around 2012, 2013, like, kind of blending this soul, R&B, jazz aesthetics and sounds. And I think now, like, 8 years later, that sound has been like almost overdone. It kind of was like groundbreaking in some type of way 8 years ago. And now I think it's almost, it needs to be further innovated. It needs to be pushed further. And I think there's some people that are really doing that. Like I really love Terrace Martin, is someone, like you said, Kamasi Washington. There's a bass player from DC named Ben Williams who's really amazing, and um I really love his sound as well. I mean, I really just listen to what what moves me in some way. And I think there's a lot of artists now who are came up through jazz, studied jazz in college. And so what you're hearing now is just the natural progression of things, because jazz went from being, you know, in the 20s being something you listen to in brothels, right, to now being something you go to the Kennedy Center to hear, you know. But I think that through that evolution, you have people who came up listening to, you know, all the bebop and stuff, and also the free jazz and the soul jazz and all of that. And so, and they also came up listening to hip hop and things that sample jazz, you know. And so now it's just natural evolution. Things are being blended and rebirthed and innovated. And I love it. Like, I just love that we're having this moment where jazz is not just thought of as, you know, being in black and white, if that makes sense, like old. It's something from a long time ago. Like, people know now that jazz is happening now, you know, and that it's to a certain extent, like, it's a young people's sport again, you know, like with massive respect for the elders and the ancestors, but it's a young people's sport in this moment. And I love that. I love that.
It's so refreshing to see. And I was having a conversation with, although he's not a musician, one of my good friends, Maurice Chestnut, who's a world-renowned tap dancer, and he put on a performance piece for the Apollo Cafe, and it was all about hip hop. But what he said in it is that there would be no hip hop without jazz, and that kind of drilled into my mind. And I went back through my like record collection, and I went through my streaming playlist, and I was just like, oh my God, this is absolutely true. I don't know how this didn't click before, but oftentimes we think that what we're creating in the now has not been done or has not been influenced by the past. And I think you kind of make that well known in what you just said.
Yeah, yeah,
So
definitely.
one thing I also wanted to ask you is, I'm seeing that there's a trend, and I don't mean to offend anyone when I say this, but there's a trend away from live instrumentation. Now, I've been in studio sessions with artists, and you have some amazing producers that are able to make these in studio sounds or these hits or these samples. But in places like DC, like you mentioned, where you're from, and even places like New Orleans, that's the staple. Like, you won't find many local artists that don't use live instruments in their recordings or don't have a full piece band. So, was that difficult for you as a newer artist coming up and assembling a band together? And do you feel like that paid off in your work?
Oh, definitely. I think, I mean, nowadays, most people don't use, you know, a lot of live instrumentation on their records just because it's more expensive. You know, and people don't have big album budgets. You know, if you listen to an album from 1974, every song has full orchestration, you know, like with not just like with a string quartet, but with an orchestra, you know. I mean, on Marvin Gaye's, like, you know, albums, they had the Detroit Symphony Orchestra playing on his albums. You know, who can afford that? Like, no one can afford that now. Not even record labels are paying for that, you know, nowadays. So I think to a certain extent, like, you know, the 80s gave us so many options in terms of, you know, like programmed instruments. And so we're still kind of exploring that and growing that. And I think where the magic comes in is when you can really like mix and blend the worlds, like, you know, it's just certain sounds that you can't get from programmed instruments, like strings. Like, one of my least favorite things is the sound of like programmed strings, like keyboard strings. It just doesn't do it for me at all. Um, and that's why, you know, I have to take more time between records because I need to save money to pay my, you know, violinists and celloists and, you know, to come in and record their parts and all that stuff. It's just, it takes more money, it takes more time. But like you said, like in DC, I think, and also I'm glad you brought up New Orleans too, because I feel like it's such a similar vibe. Like in DC, I think that live instrumentation has been at the heart of what a lot of DC artists do because of go-go music. You know, so when you grow up and you see this huge band on stage, you know, like not just like a four-piece band, but it's got a three-piece horn section, two extra percussionists, you know, whatever it is, like, and then four singers up front and all these people, you know, like you see if you go to a go-go band show, like there's like 16 people on stage. Some of which are just hype men, but you know what I'm saying, like it's the energy of that, you know. And I think when you grow up in DC, you want to maintain that energy. You want to keep that energy. And I think similarly in New Orleans as well. So yeah, I think I don't know. For me, it just always felt more natural to. I think the thing is, my writing process works better when I'm working with an instrumentalist, like one on one, because I just it just gives you so much more leeway. Like if someone sends you a track that's pre-done, then you just have a lot less. It doesn't it's not as organic. It can't grow the same way. So I really like when I'm working with an instrumentalist because I don't really play at all. I can hit a few chords, but I can't really play. So, usually I work with like a keyboard player or a guitarist at first, and we sit down and I'm like, so I have this idea, and we kind of build around it, and it's like, well, maybe I want to try it in this key. Like, let's take it up a half step, or what if we modulate here? Or, it's just like you can't have those conversations with a pre made track. So I think, yeah, it definitely comes from growing up in DC, but also just what I listened to growing up. Like, I still love that 1974 sound, with the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. So I'm always trying to find some way with my little independent musician budget to like get there. So that's the challenge. That's the challenge, but I love it.
So I want to talk about challenges right now in the U.S. that we're facing. Not only are we battling the coronavirus or COVID-19, but the brutality against Black bodies has been long ingrained into our societal norms, which it should not be. And across your social media, you've been a very vocal ally, not only for that brutality, but bringing awareness to the individuals that are often left out of those conversations. Now, one of which would be you are bringing light to Breonna Taylor and the ungodly killing of her, the murder of her by at the hands of police officers. So when we're talking about challenges, as a musician creating music during this time, um, are you ever fearful to speak out against stuff like that, especially being a new artist?
No, no. I wouldn't say fearful. I think one thing I've learned is that, especially with social media, there can be these moments where you see something trending and you feel like, oh, if I don't post about this, like people are gonna think that I don't support, dot 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 or whatever. And I think I try to be just really intentional about what I share, and also just learning, really trying to understand a situation before I give any opinion on it. Um, I don't, I feel like social media really pushes us to always act in this very quick way. And I like to take my time with things a lot of time. So I think that would be the only thing that, I try to be careful about is not making an error in some way or spreading some false information in an effort to, say something quickly. But other than that, no, I think that especially now, like the people who are going to be fans of yours are usually the people who are on the same page in a lot of ways as you in terms of how they view the world, and like the different things that matter to them and are important to them. And so I'm never afraid to speak my mind as long as I'm doing so from a well-informed position. So that's, yeah.
Is deep. It's really heavy because that's a double-sided sword. So if an artist speaks out, then they could be quote unquote in this society on as Twitter calls it canceled, right? But then if you don't speak out, then you have people that are supporters of yours that are uncomfortable because you aren't taking a stance on if it's a issue that's directly related to them. In this case, it would be um, the brutality against Black women. So I'm glad that you're saying that you do want to be a part of the conversation, but you're just being responsible in how you're using your platform to bring light to it. which I think is also important. It's much better to be slow and accurate than fast and incorrect. So there's always that, right? So one thing I do want to kind of shift the energy a bit, because when I start thinking about stuff like that, it just kind of like it crushes my spirit a bit. So I do want to talk about your affirmation workshops that you've been doing. I think right now, with us being in lockdown, most of us, and being away from family and having this time to kind of self-reflect is very important on, as it relates to the language we use to describe what's going on and how we speak about ourselves. So how did you get started with the affirmation workshops, and what are you affirming now?
So I got started, well, I'll say this, I started incorporating affirmations into my kind of self-healing practice, I think around 2014. My mother gave me a book called The Artist's Way, and which is an amazing book, and I highly recommend it for anyone who's really trying to honor their creativity in a more intentional way. But one thing the author says, I think her name is Julia or Julie Cameron, and one, she recommends that you journal every day, which I also incorporate into my self care practices, which is really important to me. And also, she has a list of affirmations that are in the book around, just nurturing your creativity. And so, and I was also taking a online class from like a music business mentor at the time, who was who also advocated for affirmations as a part of your, as an independent artist. Like, there's just a lot of self-doubt, not as any type of artist, there's a lot of self-doubt that comes into your process or can make its way into your process. And so I started using affirmations as a way to remind myself that I could do this. you know um, some of my first affirmations were, I don't have to be perfect. I just have to try. Because sometimes I suffer from um, uh, just perfectionism, not doing something because I don't think I can do it perfectly. And so that was a really important affirmation for me for years, actually, just in terms of freeing myself up to try things, and do things. And so when this crazy time came around, when everyone's at home and there's a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty, I decided that I wanted to start doing guided meditations on Instagram, because that was something that I had done for friends in the past, and that they had told me that I really need to do in a more, just in a more, in a larger way with more people. And so I thought that this would be a good time. One, because there's a need, and two, because I just had more time to sit with it and learn myself, and try new things also. And doing guided meditations in Instagram Live is definitely a new thing for me, or at least it was back in May, I think, when I started. So I decided to do that. And then, I thought, well, let me try something else. This is going well, so let me try something else. So I decided to do the affirmations workshop. I did a virtual affirmations workshop about, I guess that was like a month ago or 3 weeks or so ago. And it sold out. I capped it at 20 people because I really wanted it to be small and intimate. And it sold out. And I was like, wow, I wasn't expecting that. And it really went, it was really amazing just to be able to share what I've learned, and, kind of just be like a present, affirming, active listener for it was all women, so other women in the group, and, just kind of help or assist them, guide them in figuring out what's going to work for them in terms of affirming themselves. And I want to do it again. I'm actually planning to do it again in a couple of months, hopefully. So yeah, it's been amazing to have this time. Like I said earlier, this lockdown has really afforded me time to explore new things and parts of myself that I want to share with the world. That a lot of times, and as a musician and as an independent artist, you feel like I gotta hustle, hustle, hustle. Like I gotta focus all my energy on this one thing, or else I'm not gonna be successful. And of course that's fueled by fear, but there's always that thing in the back of your head. So at this time to just disconnect and be more peaceful and be in one place for a little while afforded me the opportunity to explore, like, okay, what can I offer to people outside of my music? Because I can't go in the studio right now. I can't perform with my band right now. So, what is it that I do and skills that I have that I can share? And I decided that, meditation and affirmations were two of those things. And in terms of what I'm affirming right now, I have a long list actually. So the way that I'm doing my affirmations at the moment is that I have a notebook and I will write the month at the top of the page, and then as I go through the month, I'll just add affirmations as they come up as I need them, and then every day I'll just read them back to myself, and sometimes I'll read the previous months as well. So I think right now this morning I probably read like about 20 or 30 affirmations, but some that are sticking out at the moment are just I am present. That's something I'm always cultivating and working on cultivating, is just truly being present. And when I'm not present, just noticing that and going back to my breath, going back to my senses, and coming back to my body in some way. And one that I've added recently that came up for me in June when the protest and movement for Black Lives was really gaining a lot of attention and energy, was that I feel like a lot of times people have trouble imagining a new world because we don't think that we're worthy of it. A lot of people have this idea that human beings are innately bad and innately violent, and that we are not deserving of peace and security and love. And so, one of my affirmations that I wrote down is that we are worthy of the life and the world that we are imagining and seeking to create. So, just an affirmation that in all this work and all this struggle, and I don't consider myself an activist, because that is a major role that you take on in your life, and I'm not gonna just give myself that label, without feeling that I've put in the work around that title. Um, but I do think that each of us in different ways is working to create and imagine the world and the life that we want. And the first step is knowing that we are worthy of that. And that's why I truly, truly, truly have the most respect and admiration for people that do take on that role of activists, because not only are they working and in the streets all the time, every day, working towards creating a new future, but they're really challenging us to imagine a new future. And I think that that's where artists have such a huge role in assisting in the imagining, like we can imagine a different world, a different life where we don't have Black and brown people being shot down in the street at the hands of police officers or at the hands of other Black and brown people. We can imagine a world where we don't have, people running away from strife and running away from insurmountable, just trauma and trying to cross a border to get away from it. We can imagine a world where we don't even have borders. There's so much that can be imagined, and I feel like people really get caught up in, well, this is how it is, and this is how it has been, and this is how it is going to be. But the truth is, if you really study history, you'll see that we're constantly reinventing what is, and this moment is no different. So yeah, that's one of my affirmations of the moment.
That's a powerful one. And I think oftentimes I've been studying affirmations and the power of speaking things into existence for about 2 months now, and really testing it to see if the blockage that I feel is based on my own internalized fixation on what is possible and my own internalized construct of what's my limit. So to hear that, I'm definitely going to grab that one. So just so you know, I'm taking that one with me. It's going to be here. The other question that I wanted to ask you as it relates to affirmations is, were you affirming your video for Clumsy being featured on BET Her and BET Soul? That's a huge feat, especially as an independent artist. And the visuals are just, come on, like your team, you and your team, you all do an amazing job in really bringing life to the lyrics in which you sing. So tell me about that video. Who did you work with that? What was the kind of concept going into it?
Yeah, so the director's name is Terrell Siobhan, and she's a another Black woman. She's a Howard alum, and she reached out to me last year and said that she wanted to really do a music video project because she had done a couple short films and she really loved my music and would love to work with me. So we kind of put things in motion. So she also directed the Awakening visual EP that I released on Valentine's Day of this year, and she directed the Clumsy music video that we put out recently. And then the director of photography is Kirby Griffin, who is based in Baltimore. And I think the other most important person on that team probably is our lead stylist, Desiree Van Frederick, who is many more things than a stylist, but we had her serve kind of like in terms of styling and art direction and on those two projects. And I'm really happy with how everything came together. I think if Beyonce's taught us anything, it's that in 2020, your music needs to have a visual. I mean, she taught us that in 2013, didn't she? Or whatever year that was when she put out the Beyonce project, dropped it on us. I still remember that.
Yeah.
So I think that, I'm really happy that I was able to connect with Terrell and that she brought on Kirby and we, brought in Desiree because I think that the final product really came out beautifully and I'm just happy people are responding to it. I'm glad that my, agent Sherry Thompson was able to get the Clumsy video in front of some of the producers at BT and that they liked it. So I'm just, I'm one of my affirmations, I actually do have just some words that I have posted on my wall in front of my bed that every morning I wake up and I see those words. And one of them is abundance. So anytime something just happens unexpectedly, I'm just like, man, I'm just abundant. I'm just blessed. Yeah.
So first of all, that's true about Miss Knowles Carter. Okay, if your visuals, especially with the Black is King just released, um, I think that most times independent artists struggle with finding a great team of individuals to come together to really bring their vision to light, or they just don't have the financial means, as you kind of spoke about before. I really want to get into your mindset, and you kind of already spoke about this a bit, which I have tons of questions about, but the Awakening Part 1 and Clumsy was a featured track on that. Um, Going into your visuals, how do you storyboard your concept? So where do you really pull from?
So I'll say with the Clumsy music video, um, I think the first thing we talked about was colors. I'll go back. So we actually first started brainstorming the Awakening visual EP. And in that, we started talking about colors and storyline. And we really wanted each song because if you haven't seen it, the Awakening, the visual EP, is a long form music video that kind of uses different clips from all 4 songs on my Awakening EP to weave together this narrative, this storyline, this love story. And we really wanted each song to have a distinct color story. And so with Clumsy, both in the visual EP and in the full music video, we really wanted it to have kind of rich colors, warm colors, and then we kind of just kept going from there. And we knew on acceptance, we wanted kind of like these bright colors, it being a garden, floral colors. And So I think the first thing we talked about was colors, and then we went into storyline and narrative, and how do we build the story without much dialogue, and in terms of the visual EP. And it kind of just started there, and it kind of grew, and then we had like a mood board that we used, and just for Clumsy, I think the mood board had some silks and some satins, and also had there was this Kenyan photographer that Terrell really loved, who uses like slivers of light on people's skin, and we kind of incorporated some of that into the Clumsy video as well. So it just kind of built and grew, and I really wanted to use one of my favorite movies is The Wiz. I love The Wiz. I love the 70s. I love The Wiz. So I really wanted to. There's this shot in The Wiz where they're in the it's like the carnival scene. They're in like this broken down amusement park, and Nipsey Russell is dancing and singing, and there's these three beautiful like sculpted women with these huge afros who like start singing background for him. They just kind of open their eyes slowly and start singing, and it's like a halo of afros. And I was like, I really want to do like that halo of afros with the background singers like from The Wiz. So we found a way to incorporate that too. And we also wanted that kind of like vintage feeling, so that The Wiz was a good place to kind of pull from as well. So yeah, I'm really happy with how everything came out, but I can't really take a lot of credit from that. I wasn't behind the camera. But I'm just happy that it all came together.
Well, I've watched it several times, and each time I watch it, I catch a different reference. So I think that really speaks to um, how much you care for your work and how it's presented, and how it's received by audience. So let's actually talk about the EP. I know that there you were on live the other day, and I'll kind of get to that a bit later about your kind of fundraising for part two to come, which I'm excited to hear. But let's kind of talk about Awakening Part One. You have some really deep rooted themes that I would love to hash out a bit more. One of which on Set Myself Free, which is one of my favorite tracks on the project. Um, I felt like you were talking to me, like I felt attacked. I was just like, girl, does she know you? Like, is she in here? Is she watching you? And the theme in that one is forgiveness of self. Oftentimes we are told and directed at to forgive someone else, right? Forgive your sibling, forgive your parent, forgive your partner. But this one, it was just like, girl, have you taken the time to really look at yourself as a person and not just existing? You have to forgive yourself for some of the past things you've done, or past pain that you've caused yourself, right? You're forgiving everyone else. Why not yourself? So I would love to hear about how that came together.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, the lyrics for that song, at least for the first verse and pre-chorus, were pulled directly from my journal. So I kind of so let me backtrack a little bit. So the album Awakening Part 1 was inspired by these three books that I've read over the last 3 years or so. The first one is called How to Love by Thich Nhat Hanh. The second one is called The Mastery of Love by Don Miguel Ruiz. And the third one is called All About Love by Bell Hooks. And I was reading those three books over the last 3 years or so, and I was also journaling every day, and I was meditating. I was doing my affirmations, trying to grow. And I also got married, and we moved and we traveled, and, I had great accomplishments in career. I had disappointments in career, all different types of things. And so when I sat down to write the album, I'd already decided I really wanted to, thematically, I wanted the album to be based around these three books and things I had learned from these books. And when I'm sitting down to work on a project, usually I start by flipping through my journals, looking through old journal entries, looking through, things I had jotted down, like as potential song lyrics, like maybe even 2-3 years ago. And I came across this kind of letter I had written to myself in 2014 when I was kind of in a relationship that really was not going well. I don't even know if it was an official relationship, but it was a situationship that was not serving me and was causing me a lot of self doubt, causing me to constantly be kind of just looking at myself not through the eyes of loving kindness. So I went to visit my grandfather, who lives in Florida, and I always like to have just alone time. Alone time is really important to me in terms of just taking care of myself. So whenever I visit my grandparents, it offers me a fair amount of alone time because they have like, they're around. My grandmother's passed away, but my grandfather, he has his schedule he does every day, and whether I'm there or not, he's gonna do his normal schedule. So I can kind of do my own thing and hang out with him when I want to and stuff. So I was just enjoying kind of being by myself, going to the beach and all that. And I remember I was sitting in this room in my grandparents' house, the same room I've been staying in my whole life when I go visit them. And I was just thinking about, I don't know what it was, but I just had this moment. I kind of had like this breakdown, like in a good way, like this moment that I realized, like, I need to let all this stuff go. Like, all this doubt that not only me, but the person I was dating kind of helped put in my head, that it's really time to let this go. Like, I think I just had an argument with this individual. And so I was ready to let him go entirely, I wasn't ready to forgive him yet. I eventually got there. And that's what the second verse of the song is about. Actually, it's about forgiving him. But I realized I just needed to forgive myself for all these things that I've done in the past. People I had let down, letting down myself, failing classes in college, getting drunk and falling down on the pavement, like all these things that just happen, in life and that you carry with you. And it was just kind of this process of realizing that like doubt and shame and guilt are very useless emotions. They're just useless at the end of the day. I feel like we come up in a society that teaches us that shame and guilt are going to push you towards something. But usually, when you grow out of a place, or when you push yourself out of a place of shame or guilt, you're really pushing yourself out of a place of fear. So anything that you get into, any new situation you move into, you're going to bring that fear with you. So I just realized that I wanted to grow from a place of love and self-acceptance. And I just started writing myself, like, I forgive myself for this, I forgive myself for this and this and this and this and this, like 3 pages worth of I forgive myself, I forgive myself. And then it turned into I'm thankful for, like, I'm so thankful for this, I'm thankful for that. And that was like another 3 pages, and just like it was a very healing moment. And so when I sat down to write this project and I was reading, they talk about forgiveness in all 3 of the books, but in the Bell Hooks book in particular, she talks about how, forgiveness, if we don't allow ourselves to forgive, it really is a barrier to healing. And so I took what I had written in my journal and I just kind of started developing it into a song. And there was this Minnie Riperton song I love, Adventures in Paradise, where she kind of goes uh, in the, like, the melody, her voice just goes up and up and up and up, and you think it's just going to keep going up. And I love that. And so when I was writing with my co-writer Zachary Cutler, who plays guitar and co-wrote the song with me, he and I were listening to that, and I was like, yeah, I want my voice to just go up and up, and I'm just gonna hit the highest note I can, in the chorus. And so, and kind of just to represent like that freedom, like, you know what, I'm gonna set myself all the way free. I'm gonna set myself so free that I'm gonna hit this note that I'm not even sure I can hit every time. So that was kind of the inspiration behind the album as a whole and that song in particular.
So let's talk about part 2. I know that you're still cooking it up. So I'm excited to see if you're willing to share where your thought process is now. You speak about thematically where the part one came from. So is there any kind of Easter eggs you want to drop as it relates to part two?
So I think the books that I've read, those three books that I'm pulling from, are still the inspiration for part two as well. I think the only difference is that I'm kind of shifting perspective, shifting thematically from focusing on romantic love and self-love to focusing more on this idea of universal love. So what does it mean to not only love yourself and love your partner, but also, love and forgive your family members and find a way to work through, familial issues? Because that's a big part of our lives that we rarely talk about in music in particular or at all. um, what does it really mean to trust in divine love? Like, if you believe in the creator or the source or however you name it, the universe, ancestors, what does it mean to really trust in their love and their guidance? If you, you know, what does it mean to truly love nature and to take care of the earth? What does it truly mean to love a child in a way that allows them to be free and seek out their own path in life, and not try to mold them into what you want them to be? I don't have any children yet, but on this Awakening Part 2, I do have a song that I kind of wrote to my future child, about how transformative I think that love will be or might be for me. So just kind of like, this book pulls a lot more from this album pulls a lot more from the Bell Hooks book, because she talks about this idea of a love ethic. So not just in our interpersonal relationships, but really, how do you embody and manifest the love ethic in society at large, and what that means in terms of our politics, how we spend our money, how we, understand, relationships in a broader scale, interconnectedness, those type of things. So that's really what the new project is about. And I will give you a little Easter egg that the first single is called Spirit Tell Me. And I'm actually going to be getting in the studio to record that in about 3 weeks. So I'm very excited.
Exciting to
Yeah.
hear. So I know that I spoke about this a bit earlier, but just kind of glossed over it. You are actually fundraising right now for part two. So one of the things that I do want to ask is, um, given that a lot of independent artists, as you referenced in the beginning, rely heavily on touring or live performances and outside being open, as Twitter has dubbed it, to sustain themselves, how can fans at this moment help you and support you?
Oh, thank you for that question. So I think, if anyone wants to support, like you said, I am fundraising for part two. So if you want, you can go watch my previous concerts on YouTube. My live streams, live from my living room is what I call them. And you can give donations through, where I mentioned in those videos. And I think also, let's see, how else could they support me? Oh, I just released my previous project, Awakening Part 1, is available for pre-sale and a limited edition vinyl pressing. So if you're a album collector, you can purchase one of those, and that definitely support me. You can also buy any of my previous works, physical copies. I have CDs and also vinyl of my previous albums that's available for sale on my website. So those are definitely some monetary ways to support. And then also just sharing my work with anyone you think will also love it. If the clumsy music video or the awakening visual moves you, just sharing it with someone, sharing it with your social media platforms really means a lot. And if you love the music, just share it. That's all I can really ask, because as an independent musician that for the most part is self-funded, I've been really blessed to get several grants, which is amazing. over the last few years to help me with recording projects and things. But the main thing that you struggle with is just reach. How do you reach more people without having a budget for, radio promotion and a huge budget for social media campaigns and things like that. So the more that people just come across the music and say, wow, I love this, and um, find me online and share it with their friends, and I love and appreciate that so very much. Yeah.
Awesome.